Welcome to the first stitching day of our Whimsical Flowers Stitch Along. I'm Ashley with Nell and Jo Crafts, and today we're going to be working on the back stitch on these stems with leaves. Now I wanted to start here by showing you the finished stems and telling you that stitching all of these in one night, if you're a beginner stitcher, or even just have other things on your mind, might be more than you want to do in one sitting, and that is okay. If you want to stitch them all today and get them done to be ready for tomorrow, go for it. It's 100% possible, but it also might take a minute. So if you find that you can't get all of these done today, don't worry, still show up tomorrow for the next video. You can always come back and stitch these later. Nothing overlaps with them, so they can be done later. They're just a really great place to start our stitching, to get us a foundation of some work before we jump into the flowers. So let's get stitching. Today, we're going to start stitching the stems here. But before we do that, I want to show you how to split floss. The majority of this pattern is made with 3 strands of floss on your needle. And you'll see that a strand of floss has 6 individual little pieces in it. So we're going to separate it down to 3 to start. And the best foolproof way to do this is to just grab one little strand by itself and pull it all the way up and out. And then you have one strand. Ooh, this way, one strand. Then we repeat. Now you want to make sure you straighten out any kinks, because they won't work if you have kinks. And then we do the same process. We'll grab one strand and just pull it out. So now we've got 2. And then we again just run our hand across that, make sure there are no bunches or kinks in it, and then grab our last thread and pull it out for 3 strands. Now, the magic part is this is 3 strands here on this side because we were working with 6. And then this other side, we are going to line up the tips, or I should say one end. Here we go. Of each strand, all at the same location, right there. And then you just run those through your hand, and now we have a set of 3 here as well. Now there's also a lot of color switching in this pattern. So once you figured out how to split your floss down to the right number, down to 3 strands, then this is how we thread a needle, the easy way. You're gonna let's do this one. Lay your thread over your needle, and then I like to run it back and forth. And what we're doing when we're doing that is you're making sure that all 3 threads or 6 threads or however many threads you have are lined up next to each other. None of the threads are overlapping. Next, you grab it in your other hand, you're pulling down, and then you slide off your needle and you pinch it here in your fingers. Then you turn your needle so you can see the eye, line it up over that little bit of color, and slide it into your needle. Grab those threads, pull them out, and then you have a threaded needle. Now, if for some reason that method doesn't work for you, it is 100% okay to cut these ends and hold them. They're a little unruly right now. Hold them and put the eye of the needle on. Sometimes I have to lick them so they stick together and then put them on. I find this method though of laying it over my needle and then putting the folded section through to be pretty effective. So you are now well equipped with the knowledge you need to start stitching. So in your pattern, you'll see that the stitch diagram is broken up into 4 sections because we've got a lot of detail going on here. So we're gonna start here at the top. Let's take that out so you can see a little bit better. And we're gonna be working on these stems. So any stem that has a leaf, here, 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 leaves are gonna be the loopy ones. All of these, right? All of these are going to be backstitch. All right, that's what we're going to work on today. All of the stems with leaves. Any of the stems that do not have leaves, they're going to be stem stitch. We'll do those tomorrow. And we'll also talk about this one, and then these ones I've called out. We'll talk about tomorrow as well. These 3 that are called out as backstitch because they're a little bit different. All right, so I like to work left to right. That means I am working on this tall one here with leaves first. And it's the lightest green, so I have 581 on my needle. And to start with, I just put a knot at the end. Nothing fancy, just loop it over. Whoop. Pull it under, make a knot, right? That's what I've got on the end of my needle. All right, let's get the focus to hold still. Perfect. Now, it doesn't matter if you work bottom to top or top to bottom, whatever your heart's desire. Today, I'm gonna work bottom to top. So I'm gonna come up here at the very end of the line. Pull my thread all the way up, and then I'm gonna take a fairly large stitch. This is about 1/4 of an inch, maybe a little bit less, straight onto the line. Next, I come up that same stitch length, whatever stitch length you picked, along the line. Next, we're going to go down into the end of the first stitch. All right? And then you pull down. That is the back part of a back stitch. So then again, we come up along our line, 1 stitch length away, and then you go back into the end of the previous stitch. Now it's all right if you don't make it exactly into the same hole. We're just looking to not have any gaps between our stitches. And the best way to do that is just to make sure they're touching. So I'm going to continue along here, and I'm always trying to make my stitches consistent in size to each other in the line. I will try and probably keep this same stitch length for all of the back stitch I do in this pattern, but I don't want you to worry about it. Stitch length is a personal thing. If you like really big stitches, make really big stitches. If you like little stitches, make little stitches. I find for nice, mostly straight lines like this, I prefer a little bit longer stitch, mostly because I'm a little impatient and want to get done a little faster. So we'll keep stitching to the top of our flower here, and then we're going to talk about these leaves that we have right here. Okay, I've stopped right here next to the leaves because I realized I wanted to save a little bit of thread. Instead of jumping down from here to make the leaves, I'm just going to stop here and make the leaves and then continue on my line of backstitch. So we're going to make a detached chain here and then on this side, and we're going to leave this center line empty for now, and we will fill it in a minute, because if you'll remember from my diagram, it's dark green. Well, it's actually the medium green. It's harder to see on screen. So it's going to be 937. So I want to wait to stitch those inside lines. So this is how we're going to make a detached chain. We're going to come up right at the bottom of this loopy shape. Pull your thread all the way up, and then you either want to hold it out of the way or grab it with an extra hand. If you do it this way, you can hold your hoop still, which is convenient. And then we're going to go back down at close to or exactly the same spot. And we're going to pull down, but we're going to leave a loop on the top. That's why we're holding our floss. Now, I'm going to come up through the loop at the tip of this chain stitch. And then I'm going to pull my thread out the direction the leaf is pointing, because if I pull my thread this way, the chain can get caught down here, and that's not what we want. So we want to, let me loosen this back up, be pulling the direction that our leaf is pointing. And I'm going to pull gently so that my loop, my chain stitch here has a little bit of space in it. Now you can see that this chain stitch is not lining up exactly with this line, and that is 100% okay, because I've traced with a friction pen, which means, let me show you again real quick. If you got the kit, you got a black version of this, a Pilot friction pen. It's heat erasable, so this line is going to disappear at the end, and it's not going to cause me any problems because we're drawing on light fabric. So with this loop nice and open, I'm going to go down on the outside of this thread. All right, so it comes up on the inside, down on the outside, and that anchors our detached chain. And then we're going to come up on the other side of our line, and we'll repeat on this side. So we come up. Oh, don't, make sure you don't stitch on your tails. You can see both of my ends are stuck in the fabric right now. There it is. We don't want to do that. We want to stitch on just one at a time. So I'm going to pull this loop this way, just so you can see my hands better. You go down in the same spot or very close to it. Pull this down, leaving a loop on top. Then we go up at the tip of our leaf or chain, pulling the direction the chain is pointing. Make sure we stop while it's still nice and open. Then I go down on the outside of the chain and pull down. And now I'm just going to hop back over to my line right here. This is where my next back stitch would start. So I'll just pull my thread right to there and continue back stitch up the rest of this line. Now, when we finish this stem here in just a couple more stitches, what I'm going to do is tie off my thread. Typically, I like to just keep stitching with one color and get as much done as I can without having to tie off. The problem with doing that on this pattern is that if I were to pull to the next, this thread to the next light green stem, it's this guy all the way down here. And if I started right here, I'd have this long section of floss hanging out on the back of my hoop. And not only would it have a chance of showing through to the front, it also just wastes thread and can get in the way when we're stitching other parts. So I'm going to go down here, finish my last back stitch, and then I'll tie off my thread, and then I will move on to the next stem. All right, I flipped you over so I can show you how I anchor this thread. I like to, when I'm anchoring to a line of stitching, I go under the next stitch down from where I ended, and then going the same direction, I'll go under, and I'll maybe try and split some threads with my needle, go under that line again, and then I like to come back up so my thread wraps around this last stitch. Give it a nice little tug there to finish, and then we're just going to trim nice and close, and that isn't going anywhere, and you are ready to move on, tie a knot, and make your next stem. All right, we flip back over, and I have changed to 937 on my needle. Now typically I wouldn't do this immediately after finishing this stem. I would continue stitching with whatever thread I had on my needle and get more 581 stems done, but for the purposes of teaching, let's finish these filled detached chain leaves. So with 937 on my needle, I'm going to come up right inside the tip of this leaf. You can shoot for the top of the line, you can shoot for the tip of the leaf. Either way, you're going to be just fine. Pull all the way up, and then we're just going to make a big straight stitch. So I'm just going to run my needle all the way down right here to where the end of our detached chain meets, and then pull down. And you see how that makes a nice solid fun leaf that's a little bit wider than otherwise. And then I'll repeat the process on this side. I think my thread's caught on something. There we go. And then slide my needle down into the end, push down, and then I will anchor off this 937, and then I'm going to jump over here and I'm going to show you how I stitched a stem that has lots of leaves and they aren't filled detached chain. Alrighty, we are stitching here in the middle. And so again, this is a stem with leaves, right? So it's backstitch. Now for this stem, I'm just gonna run backstitch all the way up the center. We have made it to the end of our line. And now we are going to start with this top detached chain. And so I'm going to come up right here at the top of my last backstitch, make the loop, and come up at the tip of the chain or the leaf. Pull the direction it's pointing, and I'm just going to pull this one kind of tight until it's snug. I'm not worrying about it staying open or closed. Whatever it does is just fine by me because I'm not adding any more stitches inside. I just want it to lay nice and snug to the fabric. And then I'll come down to the next one, come up, and repeat the process. Okay, I have finished this stem, and I will tie off and continue stitching any stem with leaves with a back stitch, and I will check in with you tomorrow when we learn stem stitch.